In the twilight of Imperial Russia, one woman stood beside the doomed Romanov dynasty, Alexandra Feodorovna, the last Tsarina. But behind her legacy lies a lesser-known story, a family of princes and princesses shaped by tragedy, duty, and the shifting powers of a fading empire. Born Alex of Hesse and by Rhine, Alexandra was one of 7 royal children, each carrying titles, destinies, and burdens of European royalty. From the salons of Darmstadt to the courts of Berlin and London, their lives intertwined with kings, queens, and revolutions. Victoria was born Princess Victoria of Hesse and by Rhine on the 5th of April 1863. She was born at Windsor Castle in the presence of her grandmother, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Princess Victoria was the eldest child of Princess Alice of the United Kingdom and Louis IV, Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine. Victoria spent her early life in Bessungen and then the new palace in Darmstadt. She shared a room with her sister Elizabeth, whom Victoria was very close to. When Victoria was 3, she and Elizabeth were sent to Britain to live with Queen Victoria during the Prussian invasion of Hesse. During the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, military hospitals were set up in the palace, and Victoria helped her mother in the soup kitchens. Victoria was intelligent and was educated with Elizabeth. Victoria adored books and was an avid reader. She kept a record of all the books she read throughout her life. Victoria's childhood was mostly happy, with her mother being hands-on in the care of her children. Victoria and her siblings received a strict education and were encouraged to be humble. They lived modestly, doing their own chores, and their mother sewed their clothes for them. Their mother spoke to them in English and their father in German, which helped them to become fluent in both languages. Tragedy would strike the family in 1878. Members of Victoria's immediate family, including Victoria herself, fell ill with diphtheria. On the 16th of November 1878, Victoria's youngest sibling Marie died. And less than a month later, Victoria's mother died. Victoria found herself suddenly being treated as a surrogate mother to her younger siblings and a companion for her father. The death of her mother ended her childhood and would have a major impact on her for the rest of her life. Victoria and her siblings would spend subsequent years under the supervision of their maternal grandmother, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. The Queen became close to her Hessian grandchildren, becoming a sort of mother to them. Throughout her life, Victoria had met Prince Louis of Battenberg, who was her first cousin once removed. Prince Louis had adopted British nationality and was serving as an officer in the Royal Navy. They became engaged in the summer of 1883, after a period of mourning for her uncle Prince Leopold, who had passed away in March 1884. Victoria married Louis in the chapel of the Old Palace in Darmstadt on the 30th of April 1884. Victoria's father was against the marriage for many reasons. He would be losing his eldest daughter, and his cousin did not have the financial resources to provide for Victoria. However, Victoria did not care about this, and made it clear that she would marry Louis with or without her father's blessing. In the end, Louis put his daughter's happiness before his own and consented to the match. Louis and Victoria had 4 children: Alice, Louise, George, and Louis. The family moved around quite a bit, due to her husband taking up residence where he was based for his job. Victoria continued to visit family throughout Europe. In 1914, during a visit to see her sisters Elizabeth and Alex in Russia, Victoria received a telegram from her husband, instructing her to come home immediately, as the First World War had just broken out. Assuming Russia would be safe during the war, Victoria left all her jewels with Alex for safekeeping. Sadly, Victoria would never see her sisters again, as both would be killed by the Bolsheviks in 1918. The death of Elizabeth in particular was hard on Victoria, who absolutely adored Elizabeth and was very close to her, even though time and distance had separated them. In 1913, Princess Louise, Duchess of Argyll, Victoria's aunt, gave Victoria and Louis Kent House on the Isle of Wight, which Louise had inherited from Queen Victoria. Because Victoria and Louis had rented for their entire marriage, this was the only home they ever owned in the United Kingdom. In 1914, Prince Louis was forced to resign from the Navy due to widespread anti-German sentiment. While he still remained in the Navy, he was not on active duty and spent the war hoping to return to service following the war. As well as this, King George V of the United Kingdom changed the name of the royal house to Windsor and asked all his relatives to relinquish their German titles. The couple did so and took the surname Mountbatten, the anglicised version of Battenberg. Victoria was offered the option to retain the style of princess, but she declined, stating that her husband's title was good enough for her. Louis was created the first Marquess of Milford Haven. He was offered a dukedom, but he declined, as he felt he did not have the finances for the title. He was the only relative offered a dukedom, most likely due to the king's great admiration and respect for both Louis and Victoria. Victoria was disappointed with her cousin for making them change their surname. To her, it was another slap in the face of her husband, who had devoted his entire life to Britain. While George and Victoria would remain close, she never fully forgave him for this. Louis formally retired in 1919, after Louis was informed he would not be recalled to service. Because of the financial reasons, the Mountbattens sold Kent House and Heiligenberg Castle, which Louis had inherited from his father. Their friend Lieutenant Colonel Critchen offered them a home on the grounds of Netley Castle, where they would settle for several years. Louis died suddenly on the 11th of September 1921. His death devastated Victoria. Their marriage had been a love match that had stood the test of time. George V was concerned for her financial position and offered Frogmore Cottage. She declined, as she had already paid the rent for the rest of 1921. However, in 1922, she did accept his offer of apartments in Kensington Palace. After extensive renovations, Victoria lived there for the rest of her life. In the 1930s, Victoria took in her grandson Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark. His mother Alice was institutionalized. Victoria, along with her two sons, took over the care of Philip. Victoria continued to visit her relatives in Europe in later life. More tragic losses would occur for Victoria in the 1930s. Her brother, Ernst Louis, died in 1937 from lung cancer. Only a month later, Ernest Louis' widow, Eleanor, their eldest son, George, his pregnant wife, Cecile, who was also Victoria's granddaughter, and their two sons, Louis and Alexander, who were also Victoria's great-grandchildren, would die in a plane crash. The next year, Victoria's son would die of bone cancer. These losses took a heavy toll on Victoria. During the Second World War, Victoria spent time in Windsor Castle with King George VI and his family after Kensington Palace was bombed. Prince Philip made frequent visits as well, which allowed him to spend time with his future wife Elizabeth, George VI's eldest daughter. In 1947, Philip and Elizabeth were wed, which delighted Victoria in knowing that one day her descendants would occupy the throne of the United Kingdom. The following year, her great-grandson, Prince Charles, later Charles III, was born. Over the next 2 years, Victoria's health began to fail. In 1950, she developed bronchitis and suffered a heart attack. She passed away on the 24th of September 1950, surrounded by her 3 surviving children. Born Princess Elizabeth of Hesse and by Rhine, Elizabeth was born on the 1st of November 1864 and was the second child of Princess Alice of the United Kingdom and Louis IV, Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine. She was nicknamed Ella by her family. 78. Members of Elizabeth's immediate family fell ill with diphtheria. Elizabeth did not contract the disease and was sent away to stay with her paternal grandmother Elizabeth for her safety. Her mother also didn't contract the disease until much later and stayed behind to nurse her family. On the 16th of November 1878, Elizabeth's youngest sibling, Marie, died. And less than a month later, Elizabeth's mother also died. Elizabeth was considered to be quite charming and beautiful. She attracted several suitors, including Prince Wilhelm of Prussia, the future Wilhelm II, German Emperor, and Prince Friedrich of Baden, the future Friedrich II, Grand Duke of Baden. She rejected both princes. The Hessian court had a special relationship with the Russian court. Elizabeth's great-aunt, Empress Maria Alexandrovna of Russia, regularly visited her homeland and was accompanied by her two youngest sons, Sergei and Paul. Elizabeth and Sergei got to know each other well, and Elizabeth fell in love with Sergei. Queen Victoria was against the match, mostly due to her strong dislike for all things Russian. Despite this, Sergei proposed to Elizabeth in 1883, and she accepted. The wedding was held on the 15th of June 1884 at the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, Russia. Two ceremonies, one Lutheran and one Russian Orthodox, were held. Queen Victoria did not attend the wedding and was represented by the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Edinburgh, her two eldest sons and Elizabeth's uncles. After her wedding, Elizabeth was known as Grand Duchess Elizabeth Feodorovna. The couple spent their honeymoon in Sergei's country estate and then settled at Sergeyevsky Palace. They also lived on the grounds of Peterhof. Sergei and Elizabeth had no biological children. It's not clear whether they ever consummated their marriage, as Sergei was gay. They later took in the children of Sergei's brother Paul, Maria and Dmitri. Their mother had died in childbirth in 1891, and their father had entered into a second marriage, this time a morganatic marriage. Paul was banished from Russia as a result. His children were not allowed to go with him, and they were placed in the care of Elizabeth and Sergei. Elizabeth and Sergei were close to Sergei's brother Alexander III and his wife Maria Feodorovna, born Dagmar of Denmark. They often represented the Tsar abroad, such as at Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee and the consecration of the Church of St. Mary Magdalene in Jerusalem. In 1894, Elizabeth's youngest surviving sister Alex married Sergei's nephew Nicholas II. In 1891, Sergei was appointed Governor-General of Moscow, and he would be appointed to the Imperial State Council and be made commander of the Moscow military district. In 1894, Nicholas became the Tsar, and over the next 11 years, Sergei became more disenchanted with the policies of his nephew. He resigned from his position as Governor-General on the 1st of January 1905. On the 17th of February 1905, Sergei was assassinated. He was en route to the Governor-General's mansion to clear out his office when a bomb was thrown into his carriage right onto his lap. He was killed instantly. His assassin, Ivan Kalyev, was arrested and executed. Elizabeth forgave him and campaigned for him to be pardoned. It was unsuccessful. Elizabeth converted to the Russian Orthodox Church in 1891. In 1909, Elizabeth sold all her possessions and used the proceeds to open the convent of Saints Martha and Mary. She became its abbess. A hospital, pharmacy, and orphanage were opened in the convent, and Elizabeth and the nuns spent their time serving the poor of Moscow. Elizabeth last saw her sister Victoria in 1914, right before the First World War began. They would not see each other alive again. After the Russian Revolution, Elizabeth was arrested in 1918 by the Bolsheviks and was sent to the Urals, where she was joined by other members of the Russian imperial family. They were later taken to Alapaisk. On the 18th of July 1918, the day after Elizabeth's sister Alex and her entire family were assassinated. Elizabeth and those with her were thrown into a mine shaft. One of the group, Grand Duke Sergei Mikhailovich, died from the fall. Hand grenades were thrown in after them. Only one died from the grenades. The rest began singing hymns. Eventually, wood and brush were set on fire and thrown into the mine shaft. All would eventually die from their wounds. 3 months later, the White Army found the remains of the victims, and Elizabeth's remains were interred at St. Mary Magdalene's convent. Elizabeth was canonized as a saint by the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia in 1981 and in 1992 by the Moscow Patriarchate as new Martyr Elizabeth. Princess Irene of Hesse and by Rhine was born on the 11th of July 1866 at the New Palace in Darmstadt. She was the third child of Princess Alice of the United Kingdom and Louis IV, Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine. Irene was born at the end of the Austro-Prussian War and was named Irene, which was taken from the Greek word for peace, 1878. Members of Irene's family, including Irene herself, fell ill with diphtheria. On the 16th of November 1878, Irene's youngest sibling Marie died, and less than a month later, Irene's mother also died. Irene and her siblings would spend the subsequent years under the supervision of their maternal grandmother, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Following the marriages of her two older sisters in 1884, Irene became her father's companion and served as hostess at official events. Growing up, Irene visited her cousins often and became close to her cousin, Prince Henry of Prussia. They fell in love and got married on the 24th of May, 1888, at the Charlottenburg Palace in Berlin. Queen Victoria had not been informed of their courtship until they had decided to marry, and was not happy to say the least. At the time of their wedding, Henry's father, the German Emperor, was dying of throat cancer and would die only a month later. Together, they had 3 sons, Waldemar, Sigismund, and Heinrich. Their 2 eldest sons were named after Henry's deceased brothers, who had both died as children. Irene was a carrier of the haemophilia gene and passed it on to 2 of her sons, Waldemar and Heinrich. Heinrich died at the age of 4 after a fall, and Waldemar died after being unable to receive a blood transfusion during the Second World War. Because of their pleasant personalities, Irene and Henry were often referred to as the very amiables by their relatives. In 1894, they bought Hemmelmark, an estate in Schleswig-Holstein, as it was near Henry's military base. Hemmelmark served as their family home. The Hessian siblings were very close to each other. Though their marriages separated them by distance, they remained close and visited each other as often as they could. During the First World War, Irene and her sisters were separated, being on opposite sides of the war, and unable to communicate with each other. It wasn't until the end of the war that Irene learnt of the murders of her sisters Elizabeth and Alex, as well as Alex's entire family. Irene's brother-in-law, Wilhelm II, was forced to abdicate at this time as well, which brought an end to the German Empire. Irene and Henry continued to live in Germany. In 1920, Irene met Anna Anderson, who claimed to be her niece Anastasia, the daughter of Tsar Nicholas II and Tsarina Alexandra. Although Irene held out hope that her nieces and nephew had survived, she knew that this woman was a fake, and it caused Irene much distress. DNA evidence would later prove that Anderson was not Anastasia. Following her husband's death in 1929, Irene continued to live in Hemmelmark. Many more losses occurred in the 1930s. Her brother, Ernst Louis, died in 1937, followed by his widow, his elder son, his daughter-in-law, and 2 of his grandsons. Only 2 years later, the Second World War would break out, once again separating Irene and her only remaining sibling, Victoria. Following the war and her sister's death in 1950, Irene spent her remaining years in the company of her granddaughter, Princess Barbara of Prussia, On the 11th of November 1953, Irene passed away at Hemmelmark with Barbara by her side. Ernst Louis, Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine, was born on the 25th of November 1868 in Darmstadt in 1878. Members of Ernst Louis' immediate family, including Ernst Louis himself, fell ill with diphtheria. On the 16th of November 1878, Ernst Louis' youngest sibling, Marie, died. His mother did not tell her children until early December, once they were starting to recover. When she told Ernst Louis, he was overcome with immense grief, and to console him, Alice kissed his forehead. Alice fell ill from this, contracting diphtheria herself, and she passed away on the 14th of December 1878. Ernst Louis and his siblings would spend the subsequent years under the supervision of their maternal grandmother, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom. Ernst Louis' older sisters also helped to contribute to his upbringing, and he remained close to his two eldest sisters, Victoria and Elizabeth. In 1885, Ernst Louis began serving with the 1st Hessian Infantry Regiment as a sub-lieutenant, becoming a first lieutenant in 1889. Following this, he attended the University of Leipzig and the University of Gießen. Following his father's example, in 1891, Ernst Louis was attached to the 1st Prussian Regiment of Foot Guards at Potsdam. The following year, his father passed away, and Ernst Louis became the Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine. Having grown up seeing her often, and after being encouraged by Queen Victoria, Ernst Louis and Princess Victoria Melita of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha got married on the 9th of April 1894. Their marriage turned out to be an unhappy one, as they shared little in common and grew to resent each other. They had 2 children together, Elizabeth and a stillborn son. They wanted to divorce, but Queen Victoria was against this. Following Queen Victoria's death in January 1901, they separated and were divorced by December 1901. Following the wedding of his niece Princess Alice of Battenberg in October 1903, Ernst and his daughter went to visit the Russian imperial family at their hunting lodge in Poland. While there, Elizabeth fell ill, and she quickly deteriorated. A telegram was sent to her mother to come quickly, but the telegram would arrive too late. Elizabeth died on the 16th of November 1903, the same day as her aunt had died 25 years previous. Rumours started circulating that she had been poisoned by eating something which was intended for Nicholas II, but it was proven to have been typhoid which caused Elizabeth's death. Ernst Louis was distraught. His daughter had been the sunshine of his life. Ernst Louis would later marry Princess Eleanor of Solms-Hohen-Solms-Lich on the 2nd of February 1905. They had a very happy marriage and had 2 sons together, George and Louis. During the First World War, Ernst Louis was on the opposite side of the war from his siblings. During the war, Ernst Louis served as a general of the infantry at Kaiser Wilhelm II's headquarters. Ernst Louis lost his Grand Ducal throne on the 9th of November 1918, which he had refused to give up. Unlike many of his German counterparts, he was allowed to stay in Hesse and keep several of his properties. Life after the war was mostly peaceful for Ernst Louis. He passed away on the 9th of October 1937 from lung cancer. Prince Friedrich of Hesse and by Rhine was born on the 7th of October 1870 at the New Palace in Darmstadt. Friedrich was a cheerful and lively child, and he was his mother's favourite son. Following a cut to his ear in February 1873, Friedrich was diagnosed with haemophilia. This came as a shock to the royal families throughout Europe. Friedrich was the first descendant of Queen Victoria since Prince Leopold, one of Queen Victoria's sons, to be born with haemophilia. It indicated that the bleeding disorder was hereditary. Only 3 months later, in May 1873, Friedrich and Ernst Louis were playing in their mother's bedroom in the new palace. Ernst Louis went into another room to look through the window, and his mother went into another room to get Ernst Louis. Friedrich was still in the other room and climbed up onto a chair to look out the window to see Ernst Louis. The chair tipped and Friedrich fell out the window to the ground below. Friedrich survived the fall and might have lived had he not had haemophilia. He died hours later on the 29th of May 1873 from a brain hemorrhage. For years after Friedrich's death, his distraught mother often prayed at his grave and marked anniversaries of the small events in his life. Princess Marie of Hesse and by Rhine was the youngest child of Princess Alice of the United Kingdom and Louis IV, Grand Duke of Hesse and by Rhine. She was nicknamed May by her family. She was born on the 24th of May 1874 in the New Palace in Darmstadt. Marie was very close to her sister Alex, and the two girls were inseparable, sharing a nursery and being dressed identically. For the most part, Marie's early years were very happy. Her mother was hands-on in the care of her children, and the home was loving and warm. Marie was described as being enchanting by her mother. Tragedy would strike the family in 1878. Marie and her family fell ill with diphtheria. Marie's mother quickly stepped into the role as caregiver and nursed both her husband and children. Marie fell ill with diphtheria on the 12th of November 1878 and she quickly deteriorated. On the 16th of November 1878, Marie succumbed to the disease and passed away.